Well, we'll get started. Hello, everyone. My name is Priya Bhutani. Thank you again for joining us for this month's webinar. In today's webinar, we wanted to share with you some important updates to medical device regulations in Ethiopia. It's a country that we have not covered before, so we're very excited. Let's get started because we want to actually do something different this month, where we want to spend a little bit of time initially to understand the regulatory framework in Ethiopia, and then we'll go into the actual changes that happened earlier this year. And so before we begin, for those of you who may not be familiar with RegDesk, RegDesk is a regulatory software platform that uses machine learning and artificial intelligence to make global compliance easier and faster. Our platform provides RA teams with comprehensive and updated regulatory intelligence, tools to collaborate with regional partners such as distributors, comprehensive tracking and reporting, and also an AI-enabled application builder that gives you the template so that you can prepare and publish your international technical files within hours. Our approach to regulatory is unique and one that gives clients a competitive advantage. We're happy to share more information, or if you ever want to try out the system for free, let us know. We can schedule a separate call. With us today, we have a leading expert from Ethiopia, Fasika Mechete Alemu. He has over 18 years of experience working in the Ethiopian regulatory sphere, first as an inspector for the EFDA and later as a regional regulatory specialist working for numerous global medical device companies. Fasika has a proven track record working with the Ethiopian Ministry of Health, the Pharmaceutical Fund and Supply Agency, and regional regulatory bodies. And Fasika was also involved in the development of the IVD regulations in Ethiopia. So we're very excited to have Fasika here today. But before we begin our conversation, I'd like to turn our attention to our attendees. Once again, thank you for joining us. At the end of this meeting, we will hold a brief Q&A. We encourage your participation, so please refer to the chat button on your screen. In the interest of time, please submit your questions throughout the course of our talk, and we'll try to address them as we can. And in case we run out of time, please email us your questions, and we'll try to address them via email. We typically do that for our clients. And also, we'd love to get your feedback on today's webinar and ideas you may have for future webinar topics. But for today, welcome, Fasika. It's truly a pleasure to have you here today.
Thank you, Priya, for very humble introduction. Really, I'm very privileged to be here and to get the chance to explain about the new updates of regulatory framework regarding the medical device regulation in Ethiopia. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. So I guess we will get started because I know we're discussing a lot, considering that we want to spend a few minutes today to go over the medical device framework in Ethiopia. So if you wouldn't mind, can you tell us how are medical devices classified in Ethiopia?
Oh, yes, of course. Medical devices majorly classified as medical device other than IVD and IVD in vitro diagnostic medical devices, but the major classification goes with the International Global Harmonization Task Force based on the recommendation as well as the recommendation of International Medical Device Regulation Forum. So the current medical device classification criteria is in line. It has been already harmonized recently, and it is in line with the international requirements already available. So this is how medical devices are classified. Majorly, the main one are medical device other than IVD and IVD medical devices.
Got it. So it's similar to how Europe is in the sense that you have, and many other countries where IVDs are not covered within the device law. There is a separate IVD law guidance that's separate from medical devices? And is the classification system the same between devices and the IVDs?
It's different. We do have also guideline for registration requirement of IVD medical devices, and we classify as a class 1 up to class 4. The class 1 refers to the very low risk medical IVD devices. So this is how we follow. For medical device, we classify a class 8 up to class D. Class A refers to the low risk medical devices, and it is in line with most stringent regulatory authority classification criteria.
Yes. So it's interesting because medical devices are classified as A, B, C, D, and then IVDs are 1, 2, 3, and 4. So would you say that if there's a medical product that is a class 2B in Europe, and would that be similar to class C or 3? Would that be equivalent to that in Ethiopia?
Of course, yes. In addition to this, Ethiopia, as per the WHO recommendation, we classify the national regulatory authorities of the global as stringent and non-stringent regulatory authorities, national regulatory authorities. European countries located in Europe and US and America, North America, like Health Canada, Australia, TGA, these regulatory authorities are classified as a stringent regulatory authority. Medical devices approved by such stringent regulatory authorities can easily pass the registration. They have very, very average registration requirement, and the time it takes for such manufacturers who have got approval from stringent regulatory requirement is also a less one. So it is automatically accepted if it's classified class 1A in Europe, it will be automatically accepted as it is. Yes.
And so when you say the timeline, if you have prior approval from any of those GHTF countries, then it's faster in Ethiopia. But so what timeline are we talking about? What is the average approval time? Are we talking about 8 to 9 months, 5 to 6 months, longer, shorter?
Before the implementation of these new update guidelines, actually medical device registration were taking very long for various reasons. But for SRA approved, stringent regulatory approved medical devices, relatively the time is fewer. It might take less than 3 months for them if all the documentation, the required fee is fulfilled. Yes.
And so before we go into the changes, I would like to get your professional opinion on this. And obviously, this is just based on your experience. What are some of the reasons why some foreign manufacturers may struggle, even though the pathway for regulations is fairly simple in Ethiopia? What are some of the reasons or top reasons or key areas where foreign manufacturers make errors and where they experience unnecessary delays?
This question, I think I should reply this question mainly with reference to the previous guideline, because the new updates have been in effect just recently. So this question, I can reply this question with the usage of that previous guideline. So the main reason was the previous guideline was not harmonized with the other countries or with the global requirement for medical devices. So it was relatively unique, relatively specific to Ethiopian requirement, and it doesn't treat medical devices based on the risk. The rigor of the assessment doesn't consider the risk of the medical device or IVD. And so manufacturers get delayed because of most medical devices pass through the same assessment procedure and evaluation procedure. So because of this, they may get delay. And sometimes also the desert they have prepared, the requirement of the desert that they have already have was different from our requirements. So because of that, some discrepancies and queries may be raised, and back and forth was there, a lot of there. But I believe all these hindrances might be removed with the introduction of these recent guidelines, because it is common to most countries, and especially the technical part is easy to fulfill for especially well-experienced medical device manufacturers, especially if they have been approved by US FDA or European. It would be straightforward for them in Ethiopia.
So you're saying because there was, there was one law and it was confusing, so that's why the agency now has two separate guidances, one for devices, one for IVDs. And so is the IVD guidance, in our conversations you had mentioned that's fairly recent, right? As of last year is when the guideline for IVDs went into effect.
Yes, exactly. Now the guideline, the registration guideline requirement for in vitro diagnostic medical devices is separate from medical device other than the in vitro diagnosis. It is totally separate. And also there are other guidelines that we have discussed, yes, which has been introduced very recently, a month ago, we can say. So due to this, the introduction of these guidelines, I think it makes easy for the assessors or for the evaluators to decide and to classify, to approve, even to reject, so that now it's there is clear requirement, and with also better transparency, since the guidelines are posted and the manufacturer can really easily fulfill the requirements. Yes, the guidelines are now separate.
So let's talk about these guidelines, because it sounds like that Ethiopian FDA is putting in a lot of effort in creating guidelines for device companies and to provide clarification. So they are very vigilant of where they're seeing confusion and pain points, and now they're creating more clarity. So in the last, just recently, and that's why we're having this conversation about Ethiopia, are these few guidelines. So I'd like to get into these guidelines. You had mentioned that there's one guideline which is specifically for market authorization of low risk devices. Can you talk about that? What does this guideline highlight?
Yes, this guideline is called Guideline for Marketing Authorization of Low Risk Medical Devices, which also includes low risk IVD medical devices. And this guideline, most of them, the class A and the class 1, from IVD class 1 for medical device, class A medical devices are categorized as a low risk medical devices, and it has proactively listed those low risk medical devices. In the guideline, you can find the list of low risk medical devices, and this medical device allows for immediate registration. During application, the manufacturer can submit the list of these low risk medical devices and automatically get marketing authorizations without further delay. It makes it registration very immediate, no delay. But previously, there was no risk-based approach for medical device assessor. The rigor of the assessment was similar for both low-risk and high-risk medical devices. So it was time-consuming for the regulator. It was time-consuming and resource-consuming for the manufacturers also. And the authority has understood these pain points. So they have introduced this kind of guideline, and it's very clear, transparent, and available on the website. And we believe that it makes it more manufacturer will be interested to apply for this for this kind of medical devices, so that we can also create access, improved access for the society.
And so these low risk devices, so this guidance, if I understand correctly, is not just for medical devices, but IVDs as well.
Yes,
So
for both.
class one,
Here, yes, I'm sorry to
no,
interrupt you here.
no,
Yes, please
oh no,
continue.
please. So they are for class one IVDs, class A medical devices, and now it's much faster because you're saying that it was essentially the same timeline regardless of what classification you were per the original law, but now per this new guideline it's much faster for class 1 devices, almost immediate. So that's great. But and you said that the guidelines also contain a list of devices, which is also very good and makes it easier. But in terms of the process of registration, so what is the class 1 device registration? Is it just that you log into the system and register the device, or just list the device? Or do you not have to provide any critical documentation, performance specifications, and things like that?
Yeah, here, thank you. Here, yes, the registration is immediate for such kind of medical devices. As you said, it includes IVD and non-IVD medical devices also. And the list of these low-risk IVD and medical devices are listed. And that list might not be exhaustive. Maybe additional list can be added with the recommendation of the manufacturer also, if they can easily prove it. But during the registration, they should submit the list of they are only required to fulfill the administrative requirement, and they have to submit this list of low risk medical devices together during application. Then the marketing authorization will be immediate, effective will be immediate. Yeah.
Okay, so it's pretty much more administrative type of a submission,
Yes.
which is much
Yes.
easier. And is it electronic submission? Do you submit the documentation electronically, or does the AR have to physically provide it?
Yes. The electronic regulatory system, yes, it's going to be launched soon, but as of now, it is a manual submission, but it's going to be an electronic submission. Maybe after a month, something it will be launched. They're upgrading. They were handling only medicine for electronic submission. Now they're, due to this first, this guideline was the precursor for that submission. So they're going to launch it. So immediately it will be an electronic submission.
Okay, that's
Maybe it will take more additional months, but not longer.
That's great. I mean, something for us to look forward to, and
Yeah.
we'll provide an update when that does launch.
Definitely.
Um, so moving on, so the next guideline that, and this guideline that we just talked about, when did that go? When did they release this guideline for low risk medical devices?
It was a month ago. It has been effective since April 2021. It's just recently.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then there's another one that we talked about, which is guideline for medical device post-approval change notification. So this is not post-market surveillance. This is change notification. So once you have a product that's on the market, and now if you make changes to that product, how does that impact you in Ethiopia, right? So that's what it is. So can you highlight what are the key things that the agency has released in this guideline?
Yes, this is also another milestone on the regulatory evolution of our medical device regulation. It's obvious that all changes should not be treated in the same way. It's obvious because some changes might require serious attention by the regulator. Some changes, depending on the change, the change factor. So the time and the resource spent on that change approval process should be varied. I think that's very logical one. So previously it was not like this. Every change, whether it is minor, major, or critical change, it was being submitted and requires the same process of evaluation, requires approval of the authority. But this was not very effective. It has been understood that this was not very effective, and it was a pain point for clients. So the authority has introduced this post-approval change notification guideline, and this notification guideline classifies the change into 3 categories: critical change, major change, and minor changes. Those critical changes, the change that mainly affect the safety, efficacy, and performance of the medical device. And the major changes are changes on the manufacturing. It could be manufacturing process, change on manufacturing sites, change on sterilization method, something. Those are classified. In this guideline, there is detailed classification criteria, and examples are also there. So, but the minor changes are those changes that can be implemented immediately. It could be change on the layout of the label or the cartoon, or an external change, the color, the branding. All those might not require the prior approval of the regulatory. So this guideline is believed to make easier for regulatory. I'm sorry.
So 3 categories: high risk, medium, and minor. And the high risk products are your any changes that significantly impact the medical product. Then you have medium changes. That best changes for medium category are, you said, manufacturing name change, manufacturing process change, supplier change, sterilization method change. And then the minor are those that doesn't impact the safety or effectiveness of the product. So,
Yes.
okay. And then and then this is also all a manual process, right? To manage change assessments. And is there,
Yes, as of now, it is a manual process, but later on, after, as we have discussed, this guideline for automation of the application process, these guidelines were the precursor. They are prerequisite for automation of the regulatory system. So, as I have said it earlier, the regulatory automation process for medical device for submission process will be implemented, will be launched within a month, I think. That's my information I have, and it will be also automated. Notification process will be also automated, part of notification.
and then the last guidance, which you said it actually came out this month, is guideline for medical devices bundling for marketing authorization applications. So we're talking about bundling of, meaning creating product families, and how do you bundle products for the purposes of market authorization. So can you talk about that? What's so different? I mean, was bundling and product families not covered in the previous, the original law?
Yeah, it was not fully covered, and it was not as clear as the current guideline, the previous guideline. This bundling is a grouping, like this guideline is also in line with the Global Harmonization Task Force or the International Medical Regulatory Forum, where, the authority is also harmonizing all its regulatory process so that the technical requirement of all the dossier for medical device and pharmaceutical product will be similar with other countries and make easier for application for manufacturers. So this bundling criteria classifies, it has bundling criteria, it has various system for bundling as a single family system. It depends on the manufacturer how to group its product, so that, but there are guiding principles on this guideline, how to group a medical device and how to claim to certain grouping criteria. So this explained for the manufacturers, so that the manufacturer practically understand this guideline, which is common to most countries, I believe. So can easily fulfill the requirement of our regulatory authority.
And does this also cover IVDs and you know, IVD kits and all of that, or is it just for devices?
Both IVD kits, IVD clusters, all has been included in this bundling criteria.
And does this bundling criteria also, does the FDA cite examples of the bundling? Do they give examples? And so, for instance, are the instruments or rather accessories bundled with the product?
Yes, it gives an example. Yes, it depends. For each bundling classification, there are examples and there are criteria also. There are definitions also. So it gives example, like for the IVD test kits, which goes for the same for the same purpose, depending on their purpose, functionality, manufacturing process. So various mechanisms are there. It's very detailed information. Still, we can share the guideline for further information. Yes.
So we have a couple questions. Thank you so much for that information. So we'll try to address our questions in the next couple minutes. One of the questions is, on the EFDA website, they have found new guidelines that were published in 2020. However, the 2014 guidelines are still in place. Are the IVD guidelines that were published in 2020 the ones importers should be using?
All these new guidelines has a preference than the previous guidelines. Yes, that's obsolete now. That guideline is obsolete. Yeah, definitely it should have been removed. Maybe they have put it for reference, but these are the one which is currently valid guidelines.
Okay, so 2020 yes. is the guideline that should be used, and because 2014
yes.
is obsolete.
Yes.
Got it.
Yes.
Then the other question is more product specific. They're asking, can you provide clarity on dental medical devices? Do they follow the same, or are they treated as special case and exempted from registration or classification? I would imagine not, right? Dental implants.
No. No, yes, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but they are medical device, no special treatment for them. But depending on the risk they pose, they may fall under low risk or high risk products. Yes. Yeah.
Got it. And then we have last question. We're being asked if we can share the guidelines. Yes, we've been asked, are these guidelines in English?
Yes, English. The official foreign language for the authority is English only. Yes.
Yeah. And then we just received another one. Is it mandated to have a local authorized representative in Ethiopia? Authorized.
Yes, you need to have an agent to process your regulatory affairs, and that agent may have a distribution company or warehouse or not. But when you want to export to our country, you need to have legally licensed agent which have the standard warehouse and the distribution facility. So that for processing only you need to have a regulatory affair agent. But the distribution company, the importing company, can handle sometimes both the regulatory affair and the distribution.
Perfect. Well, Fasika, thank you so much for this informative session. And thank you, attendees, all our participants, for joining us again. And we look forward to seeing you all again on our next month's webinar. But Fasika, thank you once again. If we receive any questions, we may pass those along to you, see if you can help address any pending lingering questions that clients may have. But thank you, everyone, and everyone have a great rest of your day.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.